Hello, everyone. This is Suzanne at The Gospel Truth. Today actually is Sunday, August 11th. I'm recording this for tomorrow, which would be Monday the 12th. So I thought I'd get a jump start. I am doing so much better chronic pain-wise. I've been doing my exercises for my shoulder. My left knee still gives me issues, but I'm working through that. And I volunteered 3 days last week at Oakland Centers of Hope. It is a thrift store in our area, and they feed 60,000 people a month. Every week they give out food. Once a week you can go and get a box of food if you're in need. Wonderful organization, and it was great working with my daughter and pricing things and spending some time doing a good work without expecting anything in return. And it's great when you volunteer because you're giving of your time, your heart, and your love. I am considering, I got an application filled out. They are looking for cashiers. I love cashiering. I was a head cashier at Kmart many, many years ago. I absolutely loved cashiering and greeting people and seeing what they're buying and always wondering what their total is going to be after I add everything up. I just love the whole experience. I also like working in the back with my daughter pricing. That just made my week. I would ask for prayers for my husband, Ron. He's still suffering half the day with bad migraines. He's laying down right now, in fact, with the ice cap on. We're going to be leaving here about 2 o'clock to go visit my daughter, give Sam a visit with their dog, Lucy. He has a play date. It's always good to visit with family. So we're going to get right started in our lesson. We've been studying out of the book, Keep the Faith, How to Stand Strong in a World Turned Upside Down by Dr. David Jeremiah. We've been talking a lot about worry, what it is, things that we can do not to have worry in our life or to limit its grasp on us. And we're going to leave off on the topic of worry, win against worry, 4 verses, 6 words. And Dr. Jeremiah says, I'd like to leave you with some weapons you can use against worry. 4 verses to help you when your mind is prone to anxiety, and 6 words to rally around. Copy the following verses down and keep them handy. Better yet, commit them to memory. First one is Psalms 50:15. Psalms 50, verse 15. Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. Psalm 55:22. Psalm 55:22. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he shall sustain you. He shall never permit the righteous to be moved. And 1 Peter 5, verse 7. 1 Peter 5, verse 7. Casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. And here is the pinnacle passage concerning worry. The pinnacle passage. I like that. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:6-7. And what are the 6 words of wisdom for worriers? Worry about nothing, pray about everything. Worry about nothing, pray about everything. Make these words your battle cry as you take on the giant of worry. Hopefully, if we put these things we have learned into practice, we will be a lot happier and a lot healthier in our spirit. All right, we are now approaching chapter 4. Disarm your doubts. That's a biggie. Disarm your doubts. Have you ever had doubts? I have. 4 centimeters. How could 4 tiny centimeters make so much difference, cause so much suffering? How could 4 marks on a metric tape so profoundly punish a family, strain a marriage, and call into question the very goodness of God? Your daughter has a condition called microcephaly, said the doctor. Her head should have a circumference of 35 centimeters, but it only measures 31. For several days, Susan sat in the hospital pondering the ominous words. For now, nothing was sure. Mandy might lead a happy, normal life after all, but the uncertainty was cruel, almost intolerable. Marshall, her husband, was out of town. How could he be away at a time like this, a time when doctors were using words like disability and severe? For weeks, the Shelleys prayed intensely, desperately, unceasingly. Countless friends joined them in prayer. Marshall was the editor of a successful Christian magazine, and he was known and loved by many. But God didn't seem to be offering special favors to Christian editors. The weeks only confirmed everyone's deepest fears. The Shelleys' third child, it seemed, would never walk or talk, sit up, or even recognize her caregivers. Her life would be defined by seizures, rounds of hospitalization, and an infinite array of medications. Imagine facing that. At the age of 3 months, cataracts were detected in Mandy's eyes. There was corrective surgery. But did it really matter? Susan couldn't be certain her daughter ever saw her face, or heard her voice, for that matter. Family life was totally dominated by care for the suffering and unresponsive child. It was an open-ended emergency, a crisis never resolved. 8 hours were often required simply to feed Mandy. Late-night hospital trips were routine. Can you imagine the pressure that would put on a family? The anxiety, the stress? Meanwhile, the tension only grew thicker between husband and wife. Where was God? He's more than welcome to show up. Any time now would be fine, thought Marshall and Susan. It was just then, in the midst of caring for Mandy, that the surprise came. Susan was pregnant again. Here, finally, was a ray of sunshine, a message that God approved of their strong faith in hard times, and the child would be their first boy. In the 5th month, Susan went to see the doctor for an ultrasound. He brought this report. The fetus has a malformed heart. The aorta is attached incorrectly. There are missing portions of the cerebellum, clubfoot, cleft palate, and perhaps a cleft lip, possibly spina bifida. This is a condition incompatible with life. The little boy was likely to spontaneously miscarry, but in any case, he wouldn't survive long outside the womb. The doctor suggested a termination, but Susan, still honoring God as the giver and taker of life, carried the child to term. The only time she would have for getting to know her little boy, she reflected, might well be a few short weeks in the womb. The Shelleys turned their prayers to survival and healing for the child. Again, the community of faith encircled them with intercession and support. The little boy was born, took a deep breath, and turned blue. 2 minutes after he entered the world, he quietly departed it again. His name was Toby, from the biblical Tobiah, which means God is good. That wasn't how the family felt, but it was still what they believed. In a few months, Mandy followed her tiny brother into the next world, and she was buried beside him. 2 tiny coffins, 2 graves, 2 aching losses. I can't even begin to imagine the despair of this family. 2 gravely ill children. 2 babies that went on to be with the Lord. Susan grieved bitterly for her double loss. Her prayers were angry and accusing. If God couldn't take any better care of his children here on earth, how could she know they were better off now? People offered all the usual pat answers about God's allowance of suffering. None of these lines were good enough. Susan needed something for her soul. For 3 nights she lay awake, pleading for a simple thing, some assurance that Mandy and Toby were safe, whole, and cared for. Just a simple answer would be enough, just a gesture from the hand that was supposed to offer love. Then, perhaps, she could let go. Susan prayed, and even more, she listened through the silence. The question of why. Have you ever asked, why, Lord? I don't understand. I certainly have. Many times I found myself saying, why, Lord? Why did my knees go bad? Why am I having all these chronic pain issues? Why did I have to have shoulder replacement? I feel that I have so much more to do, and my restrictions are not allowing me to do what I want to fully do. I want to live a much fuller life. Why, Lord? Why? That universal question, right? Perhaps it's a defining question for our species. Why? Of all God's creatures, we are the only ones who seek to understand, to secure the reason and the rationale. Humanity will go to great lengths simply to find meaning. We challenge the atom. We push into space. But that meaning can be elusive. More essential questions haunt us. Where is the child I lost? Why am I here? What is the significance of my life? What would have happened if I'd chosen the other road of marriage, of career, or faith? Wow. I think I've answered all those. I've asked all those questions except where is the child? Well, exactly. Where's the child I lost? I have an estranged son. I haven't lost him through death, but we have been estranged for probably over 20 years. So it's hard. It's hard when we have all these questions. What do we do with all that? When the answers elude our grasp and the void ignores our questions, we suffer a kind of spiritual vertigo we call doubt. Suddenly, all the assumptions on which we built a life, large and small, are like a toothpick replica of the Eiffel Tower. Pull out one support, and, if it's close enough to the foundation, the whole structure topples. The world turns upside down. Every belief we have is threatened. I remember, I think I've told you this many times before, when I was about 25, I stood in my apartment by the fireplace. My kids were in school for the day. I was living with a man at the time. And I felt so incredibly empty inside and wondered, what example am I setting for my children? There's got to be more than this. There's got to be more that we're born, we live this life, we die, and that's it in the grave. And that's when I started my spiritual journey. And I moved out of there. I met another man that was going to church. I went with him, and I became a Christian, and I've never looked back. Oh, there have been many whys and doubts along the way. Along the way, my husband committed, he was a pedophile. I did not know that. Had no idea. He handed out candy in the church to the kids. He was well loved by the congregation. It toppled our world. And then the doubts came. Lord, I only wanted to meet a Christian man that loved the Lord, and I thought I had that, and now this has happened, and I don't understand, and I'm hurting. And did I not give it enough time before I married him? Did I not really do more of a background check? I mean, there were things that, looking back, that I could have done more, perhaps, but it was a great blow. And then a few years later, God crossed my path with a strong Christian man, and we were married for 27 years, and he passed away of a heart condition. but it was a glorious 27 years. And then, of course, I met Ron, and he is the frosting on the cake. He is the love of my life. He's so considerate. He's so loving. He's so kind. Even through his bad migraine headaches, he doesn't snap at me. He doesn't get grumpy. He's an amazing, amazing partner, amazing man. Okay, the world turns upside down. Every belief we have is threatened. For most of us, it's in the aftermath of pain and shock that the questions come. Why? Lord, why? That word cruelty haunted the mother of Glenn Chambers. On February 15th, 1947, that young man was waiting to board a DC-4 bound for Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador. Glenn was off to make his dreams come true. He was enlisting as a missionary through an organization called the Voice of the Andes. He had a few extra minutes before takeoff, so he looked for a scrap of paper on which to write a note to his mother. Then his plane disappeared into the clouds, never to emerge. It crashed into the peak of El Tablazo. Consumed by flames, it hurtled from the skies into a ravine 14,000 feet below. The unthinkable news came to his mother, followed a few days later by his final note. He had scribbled it on the corner of an advertisement that happened to be dominated by one towering word: why? The word mocked and haunted the mother of Glenn Chambers. Those were his last known words, seemingly from beyond the grave. They were filled with cheer, ignoring those looming letters, black and blaring, and asked the unanswerable. The same letters stand poised in the backdrop of our own lives. We can't ignore them forever. Inevitably, we must doubt. The Greek word for doubt carry the idea of uncertainty. They have the connotation of being unsettled, of lacking a firm conviction. Doubt is not the opposite of faith, but the opportunity of faith. Doubt is not the opposite of faith, but the opportunity of faith. The growing pains of an eager, seeking spirit. The true enemy of faith is unbelief, but doubt is a necessary leg of the journey. It stands at the ledge of past understandings and stretches painfully for new frontiers. To doubt, then, is to be human. We read the Bible and find doubters at every turn, even among the greatest of men. David, Job, Solomon, Jeremiah. In the New Testament, we quickly come down to the man known as John the Baptist, who demanded faith from his followers. He proclaimed answers in ringing orators, but he also asked his share of questions. As he sat behind bars under the arrest of King Herod, he found himself pondering deeply and darkly. He sent his men to Jesus with the question, Are you the coming one, or do we look for another? So here John is in jail. No, he's going to die. And he's starting to doubt a little bit. And I think he just wants affirmation. Are you the coming one, or do we look for another? John had been in the wilderness preaching his heart out, proclaiming the coming of the deliverer. Jesus described him as the greatest among these born of women. Quite an endorsement. It had been a short time since John had baptized Jesus. It was a moment of supernatural power, and John heard the voice of God affirming Jesus as the Christ. But now, away from the crowds and the river baptisms, within the darkness of a prison cell, nothing seemed the same. The tables were turned, and John couldn't help but ask the question straight out, Are you the real thing, or will all our hopes and dreams be shattered once again? If it could happen to the greatest man born of women, then none of us are exempt. Doubts are inedible for the weak and the wise. I was raised in a wonderful home by believing parents, but I grappled with my share of doubts through my adolescent years. As a matter of fact, doubts are basically guaranteed in Christian homes. The essentials of the faith are so ingrained, so taken for granted, that we must test them before making them our own. No, the questioning spirit is not sinful, but simply a rite of passage we must all pass through as we grow into a deeper faith. God understands. He's far more pleased when we ask the questions and challenge the assumptions than when we accept secondhand and prefabricated the faith of our parents. That's not a living, breathing faith at all, but an heirloom to display in some corner of the living room with other antiques. Your Father wants you to work out your salvation with fear, trembling, confrontation, and tears, and whatever else might be required to nurture an authentic personal friendship with the living God. Most of us need to reinstate that word doubt as a friend, not an enemy. But there's another word we need to examine: unbelief. We might say that doubt asks questions, unbelief refuses to hear answers. The former is hard miles on a good journey. The latter is the dead end, refusal to travel any further. Let's read that one more time. We might say that doubt asks questions, unbelief refuses to hear answers. The former is hard miles on a good journey. That would be, we might say that doubt asks questions. The former is hard miles on a good journey. And then unbelief refuses to hear answers. The latter is the dead end, a refusal to travel any further. We must always open our ears, open our eyes, open our hearts to God's word. We must read the scriptures daily. We must seek out other Christians, people who we admire, that can strengthen us, that can encourage us. And all those questions of why will be answered one day. And that's where our faith comes in, that God will not give us any more than we can stand, and He will carry us when we can't carry ourselves. We're not supposed to have all the answers. If we did, we would be gods, wouldn't we? So next time when we come on, we'll be dealing with doubts. So on Tuesday, it will be dealing with doubts. I think we all need that, don't we? Learn how to deal with doubts. I love this study. I'm having such a good time. All right, everyone. That's it for our study today. Answering the dealing with doubts and the question of why. Why? Why can't I eat all the case candy and cookie and not gain any weight? That's a good why question, right? All right, everyone. You have a blessed day in the Lord. Today for me is Sunday, and I hope you had a good worship service. I hope if you aren't able to get out, you listen to a good sermon online, and that your day is going splendidly, and that Monday you would be in the zone, dealing with things you've never dealt with before, feeling your spirit being lifted, the burdens coming off your shoulders as you go, grow, and glow for Jesus. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.